I'm Irene Zande. I'm the executive director and founder of Kidpower, Teenpower, Fullpower International, which we call Kidpower for short. And we work with people of all ages, abilities, identities, cultures, beliefs all over the world. Since 1989, we've reached over 6 million people, and I believe that what we're doing is going to help us reach quite a few people more. And so we really are, this is the fourth in our series of webinars, and we're going to be offering, because each one gets better, and we're going to be offering again our emotional safety webinar, this time with live demos on Thursday. So if you want to sign up for that or tell other people about that, please do. I'm very pleased today to have the honor and the privilege of having we're basically hosting a presentation by one of our longtime supporters. She's a board member with Kidpower. She's a master educator in Montessori education as well as in conflict resolution. We learned a lot from you in the first webinar, and we're excited about doing more now. So I'm going to leave it to you, to Maryse, to take it from here, and I'll pop back in from time to time. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Irene. So my name is Maryse Postlewaite, and I want to thank you, Irene, for this opportunity to share a bit about conflict resolution. We go a long way back, and I've learned so many tools from Kidpower, and it's made a difference in my life in many ways. And so I want to start with just the sense of what it's like for us here when we're kind of in a sheltered in place many of us are in. And it actually reminds me of a time that I was in a very confined place. This was many years ago when I had my first lower elementary classroom of 15 children, and I was pregnant. And it was a very small space, about 450, 500 square feet. And I noticed that over time, there were some moments when children after our greeting would rush to a place to be able to get their spot because they wanted to be sure to have a good spot in the classroom. Or other times when conflicts would arise because somebody had stepped on somebody's work. So the issue of space was one of those pieces that just kept on coming up over and over again. And I was able to use the skills that I had learned from children's creative response to conflict and a training that I had done to use those tools to help sort out how to solve the problem. And many of these tools I'll be incorporating in today's presentation as well. So in this confined space, we worked out what it was that we could do in order to avoid the children having to rush in. And we did manage that first year pretty well. And the next year, the room got expanded, and it was wonderful. So what we want to do is take a look at how it is that conflicts can arise and how we react to conflicts. And we can do this in many different ways. So to take a little look at this, we're inviting MJ and Jared from Kidpower, North Carolina.
Hi.
Hi. And we're going to do a little bit of a scenario here with them. Take it away.
Okay, so we're housemates and we have a conflict. Jared, did you eat the last of my cashew yogurt again?
Well, yeah, it was in the refrigerator, right? It's fair game.
But you know I'm allergic to the other yogurt. That's the only yogurt I can eat.
What, are we going to start putting our names on everything now in the refrigerator?
No, but you know, I have a sugar problem, and this doesn't have any sugar in it, and I can't go out now as we're shelter in place to get more yogurt, and you can eat the other yogurt. So I don't understand why you have to keep doing this.
Whatever. This is ridiculous.
Ah, fine.
So sometimes we get into a conflict and we get confrontative, and we know this isn't the best thing to be doing, but we're in that place. And sometimes if we look at what not to do, like being in a confrontation, it can help us be aware of that. There are other scenes that can take place. For example, this one.
Maryse, do you know what Jared did again the other day?
What's that?
He ate the last of my cashew yogurt again.
Man, that is incredible. He's
He
doing that.
says he won't do it again, and then he does it. Like, I don't even think we can trust him anymore.
You know, the other day I had asked him about picking up the coffee grounds from the mess he had left on the counter. And it was just like, oh, he left it out. Has he done that with you?
Well, the coffee grounds in the sink, of course, and then I have to rinse them down. That is really frustrating.
Yeah, I get that. And you know, I heard from Tabitha. She too is having problems with them. Ugh, just don't know how to deal with it.
He's just irresponsible and disrespectful.
I agree. So sometimes when we have problems, we go to other people and in a gossipy way, we'll let them know what's going on. But it only adds to the problem. It doesn't help to resolve the problem. Something else that can happen is what we'll see next.
Hey,
Hey,
how was your day?
fine.
Fine. Are you mad at me?
Nope,
Yeah, you are.
I'm not.
Whatever.
So we just ignore the problem sometimes. We just don't want to deal with it. Perhaps we're conflict averse and just don't want to get into that. That can happen as well as another scenario.
I just don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm tired of having the same conversation with him. I don't know. Maybe I was overreacting. I know it's probably my fault anyway. I guess it's just food. I shouldn't have that big of a deal about it. I'll just have some chocolate.
And so sometimes we are in denial and we just try to divert our problem to something else. And that way we are comforted, but these things end up building up inside of us and they cause triggers. And we've heard about those through the emotional safety webinar that Irene hosted. Thank you. Let's do
Thank
it
you.
for today. And Jared, we'll see you in a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And so these are ways that we might approach a conflict, but they don't resolve the conflict. They just add to the problem. So we want to try to avoid those as much as possible. In order to really help us understand that, we want to look at how our brain is functioning during these times. So I'm highlighting just a few. I'm going to share with you, still getting used to this, share with you a little bit about the parts of the brain. We're just going to look at a few simple parts. The cerebellum, which is back here, the cerebrum, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. Let's go back and looking at those. With the cerebellum, this is a part of the brain that had first developed with the brainstem. With the early humans, this part of the brain functions really well, also known as the reptilian brain. It's about the size of a walnut. And this part of the brain is really great for flight, fright, or freeze. Actually, what happens during that time is all this energy will go to our hands and our feet. So if you're being chased by a woolly mammoth as an early human, it would be great to be able to have some extra energy. And that works really well in those kind of situations. However, when you're looking to resolve a conflict, it doesn't work at all for us. What we want to use is that cerebrum, the neocortex. Go ahead and put your hand up here. Yeah, that's where it is. The thinking brain. In the thinking brain, we can make our decisions. And maybe you've looked back at a situation and you've thought, I wish I had handled that differently. Well, in all likelihood, you had a chance to calm down and think about it, and that thinking brain was active. And then we can take that, if you've thought of something where you wanted to handle it differently, use that perhaps in a similar situation in the future. The other part of the brain that's important during these times is the amygdala. It's about the size of an almond. It's not very big, and it's placed, if you take your finger and put it in your nose and one in your ear and you draw an imaginary line, it's right in the middle of your head. That little small piece, the amygdala, go ahead and try saying that word, amygdala. Yeah, it's took me a while. And that part of the brain is responsible for the emotional center. And that can be a reason why we get triggered, sometimes hijacked by our amygdala during a conflict. And the other part I mentioned was the hippocampus. that actually has an interesting etymology where it comes from the Greek and Latin words referring to a mythological seahorse, because the hippocampus is actually the shape of a seahorse. Now, the hippocampus is responsible for storing memories, especially those that were of an important value to us. And so it may be that we get triggered by something stored in our hippocampus, something that might be a scent or a color or a situation or a place. And so if those parts of our brain, the reptilian brain or that amygdala, are being triggered, then that's going to make it more challenging for us to solve a problem. But what we found is if we find tools to be able to calm down, that makes a difference. So whenever we are in a conflict, we want to avoid trying to solve it if we're not feeling in that calm state. So let's consider, what are some ways that we can calm down? I think lots of us have different strategies, but it's interesting to note some that different people have. For me, I actually build cairns with stones. They're just a pile of rocks. And when I can take time and focus and balance them, I find that to be a calming feature. My mom, she's told me about how it helps her to go in the shower, and she just shouts when she's in the shower. And that really helps to relieve some stress that she has. One of my favorites from Kidpower is calm down power. Go ahead and put your hands together like this and feel that sense of centeredness that can happen with calm down power. Some of my favorites that I've heard in workshops from children, one is a boy who described how he would go up to his room and he would talk to his stuffed animal and help share he would just share his concern with the stuffed animal. Some people find listening to classical music or maybe doodling. There are a lot of practices that focus on our breath, and that is very useful because at any time we always have our breath that's with us. And so once we have a sense of feeling calm, I want to consider now our communication. So one of the ways we can best communicate is when we, especially if it's a situation that's a little more difficult to express ourselves, we can use iMessages, which I would imagine many of you have heard and seen about. So let's take a look at some of those. And we can change a you message and change it to an I message. For example, instead of saying, you just don't listen, we can say, I don't feel heard. We want to also consider our tone when we say these things. Because if I was to say, instead of, you don't make sense, I don't understand. And if I say it with that kind of tone, that's not going to be well received. So the importance of an iMessage is that our tone matches the message that we're trying to give. And that we are sure that we have a sense that we want to have the other person be able to listen to us and that we're not blaming the other person. So instead of saying, you're wrong about that, we can say, I have a different perspective. Or you broke your promise, to I feel let down. And one that I just caught myself just the other day using by accident, or just one of those moments that we all fall into, or I do, I said, you're judging me. And when I received the reaction, I realized, oh, yeah, that doesn't work. And I changed it to, I feel judged. So looking at iMessages can help us to be sure that our messages are conveyed in a way without that blame, like I mentioned, and it can be well received. And we pay attention to that tone. And we also want to consider that sometimes, even though we might use the best words, some people have different meanings for the same words. So for example, I learned from my mom that when she and my dad were talking about just something that happened just the other day, when my mom would use that phrase, she would mean maybe a couple of days before, a week before, at best maybe a month. And then she came to learn that actually for my dad, just the other day might be up to 2 years ago, even 3 years ago. He just had a different meaning for that. I actually have was inspired to write a blog about that. And in the chat box, there are various articles that you'll be able to check out on the website. So you have reference to those. It also happens with another phrase. I recall when we've been in the car with our children when they were younger, and they would ask, or I would ask, are we almost there? And my husband would say, oh, sure, we're almost there. And for him, that might mean maybe an hour away. However, for us, it meant just like maybe 10, 15 minutes. And so what I realized is that he was accustomed to long road trips with his parents. So if it was an hour away, relative to 7-8 hour drive, that felt like we were almost there. So our roots of our language come from our experiences. And I had another experience, tell you about a story that way back when I had with a roommate, or housemate rather, and he was asked to borrow a whisk from our kitchen. And it was a whisk that I had bought. And he used the whisk, and while using it, the whisk broke. And so he came to me and showed me the broken whisk, and he offered it back to me, and he said, well, your whisk broke on me. And I was a little surprised by that, because he was just returning to me a broken whisk without any other solution. Well, my experience had been that I would return things better than I found them if that was possible. But for this housemate, for him, when I talked to him about it, he just said, well, why should I replace a whisk that's just going to break on you again? It's not a good quality whisk. And he felt like he was doing me a favor by not replacing a whisk that was of poor quality. I came to find out that for him, buying something of good quality was important. So we finally came to a solution where I paid the difference between the broken one and a better quality one. But our experiences had been different, and we both had our best intentions setting forward, but it had created that conflict. So one channel of communication is being able to speak and pay attention to words that we're using and how they might be interpreted differently by different people. Another piece is with looking at listening. And so we're going to invite MJ and Jared back, and they're going to demonstrate for us a little demo of what it's like to be able to hear one another out about a situation. Thanks, MJ and Jared.
Okay, great. Hey, Jared, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Lately, I have just been really tired and really stressed out and feeling really run down. I've been working lots of hours, and there's just so much going on.
How many hours are you working?
Well, I mean, lately, big, like 12-hour days sometimes. But the thing that's really been tough is that we've had these conference calls that I have to get on at 8 o'clock at night, and they go for 2 hours.
Wow.
Right? And that's every night of the week, and it's really starting to wear me out. It's bringing me down. I like to calm down in the evening. I like to kind of drift off and have some personal time before I go to bed. But now I'm actually getting all stressed out right before I go to bed. And I don't like that at all. And it's really taking a toll on me.
How can you have a conference call for 12 hours? How can you even be on the phone that long?
Well, no, it's not for 12 hours. It's actually a 12-hour time difference because the customer is international. Yeah, so when I'm on a call at 8 o'clock at night, it's 8 o'clock in the morning for them.
Okay, so, that makes more sense.
Yeah, but it's still really stressful for me.
It sounds really stressful. I'm sorry that's going on for you.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Jared, how did it feel to be listened to?
Well, it felt really good, and it feels very reassuring, and I think she can understand kind of what I'm going through.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, so let's take a look at some of the features of that active listening. Here we go. So you notice that Jared and MJ had that great eye contact. They were facing one another. MJ used her body language and nodding, and she was attentive. And it was important not to interrupt. And I find sometimes this is a point that can value with some emphasis. because sometimes we don't necessarily interrupt with our words, but I find myself sometimes being interrupted by my own thoughts. When somebody's told me it recently, a story about going to Costco, I'm listening to that story, but in the meantime, I have in my mind a story that I want to convey about going to Costco. So it's important that we try our best to really listen attentively. And if that story starts coming into our minds, to just remember to give all of our attention to who we're listening to. We can ask questions for clarification. And then if it's useful, if we want to get clarification, we paraphrase so that we are sure that we've understood correctly. There we go. Going back and forth. So some of the things we look to remember in those chart, and when we're listening, we want to be sure that we're not offering solutions. That can happen where we're just feeling like, oh, we want to be helpful. I've done that quite a bit, where I just want to interject a solution. However, before asking about a solution, or offering a solution rather, we want to check in and see if the person's interested in a solution. Sometimes when I was doing play yard duty, I'd have children come to me and tell me about a problem. And I had a colleague share with me that when that happens, perhaps one of the things to do is to just check in to see if the children wanted a solution or if they just wanted to be heard. And so imagine there are two children come to me and they tell me about their problem where there are children who are not sharing the swings. And then I learned to ask, so is this something you want me to do something about, or are you just wanting to let me know that's going on? I was so surprised how often it would happen where the children just wanted to express to me what was going on. So we want to be sure that there's not a just jumping in for those solutions unless they're interested in hearing solutions. Another feature that I want to consider is when we're coming to solutions is how effective brainstorming can be. Brainstorming is a tool where we just want to get in lots of ideas. As long as they're related and they're reasonable and they're respectful, then we can accept these ideas. It turns out there are some people really creative with their solutions and maybe think out of the box, and it may be that works best. So again, when we're brainstorming, just consider all the things that would be related. It reminds me of a time when it happened for our family, and our daughter was about 8 or 9 years old. And in the morning, we were starting to have some difficulties in getting everybody out of the house. So we have our son and our daughter and my husband and I, we all went to work together because both of us are Montessori teachers and our children were going to the school. So getting out of the house, I had that anxiety to be sure to get to school on time. And so it turned out at a time, again, we don't want to try to resolve conflicts when we're in the heat of them. So at another time, perhaps it was a weekend, we talked with our daughter about all the different kinds of things that happen in the morning time. There's the getting dressed, picking out clothes, brushing teeth, making lunch, and all of these different things. And then we set a bit of time. How long would it take for this time and that? And one of the pieces that took a little bit longer was that our daughter was involved in ballet, and she had long, beautiful blonde hair, and that hair had to be put in a bun, and she wasn't quite at the time where she could do that on her own, so she needed that help. And so that was added to the morning schedule as well. So we sat down, we went through all the different activities, and we talked to her about what time to get up in order to fit that in. And then she offered something that took my husband and I by surprise. She asked, would it be possible for her to take her bath in the morning time? And in my mind, I thought, what? You want to add to the morning time? And when we unraveled it a little bit further, it turns out that what was going on for her is that she liked being in the cozy bed and it was all warm, and she didn't want to get out of bed because it was colder in the house. And she knew that if she could look forward to a warm bath, she could get out of the bed, draw the bath, get back in bed until the bath was ready. And then she was willing also to add extra time to the morning if she could take the bath in the morning. And so something we would not have ever thought about, but it worked for her, and it turned out to be a great, great solution for us. So in looking to solve problems also, it's helpful to have agreements. Now, I'm talking about the kind of problems that may be long-term, maybe more complex, maybe something that can't just be resolved by people taking turns or Rochambeau or that kind of thing. So for this, I've designed 5 agreements that we can make before meeting together to solve a problem. So let me go to that chart. And these agreements have an acronym to help remember what they are. The acronym is POWER. The P is for keeping the problem private. We don't want to be gossipy about it and going out to other people about what the problem is. The exception is for children. We always want children to be able to come to us with their problems. The O is for one, meaning one person speaks at a time. The W is for to want to solve the problem. If the problem keeps coming back up over and over again, one possible reason might be that somebody who's in the problem doesn't want to solve the problem. We still want to try to solve the problem, but understand that that can happen. And so we just get to be taking advantage of what the benefits are to conflict resolution. And that is that you're going to have a better relationship with the people that you're with, because you'll understand them better. Even if the problem doesn't get solved forever permanently, it might come up again and again. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. The E is for equal, meaning that the solutions that we have, we want to make sure that they're equal and fair. And it reminds me of what my dad accounted when he was a young person with his brothers and his sister, a young child, and it was time to split a cake or a pie. Their tradition was that whoever cut the piece of cake into the equal pieces, as equal as could be, would be the last person who would serve himself. And so as a result, whoever did the cutting made sure it was really fair. And we want to be sure that's true of the solutions we offer. We also want to have the 3 R's. I learned about this through Jane Nelson's positive discipline. And so the 3 R's are in relationship to a solution, that they be respectful solutions, that they be related to the problem. Sometimes that can be a challenging one to have the solution be related. And lastly, that it be a reasonable solution. So with that, we want to see about taking all of this, putting it all together, looking at being calm, having a time when we're going to use our iMessages, considering making sure that this is a time that everybody who's involved in the problem is ready to discuss it, that there are good listening skills that are active. We're considering what parts of our brain are at work, and that we've considered the 5 agreements. And so I have a recipe. This recipe is just that. Just like any other recipe, perhaps a recipe for tomato bisque soup. There are many in many books. These are steps for you to use, and you might decide, just like the chef, to add a little bit of something or to take away. So you, in practicing with solving problems using these steps, might find some things that work better for your situation. Let's take a look at those. So these steps, like this recipe, is to begin with being calm, checking in with each other and making sure that everybody's feeling ready to solve the problem. If not, it's okay to then, as you get started and there's still some edginess, to just say, perhaps we can do this another time, and agree upon a time. You can then review the 5 agreements, the power, that you've kept it private, one person speaking at a time, that you want to solve the problem, that the solutions will be equal and fair, and that they'll be related, respectful, and reasonable. Then each person takes a turn to describe the problem and to share the feelings. Using iMessages here can be really helpful. The other people involved can paraphrase and check in. We want to be sure that each person feels understood. Then it can be really helpful for each person to reflect with the group or with one another what they could have done differently. And from this, sometimes some solutions start rising. And so then we can brainstorm solutions, understanding we're not judging whether they're going to work or not. We're just going to consider all the different things and then choose maybe more than one that can work together. And then if it's been a situation where it's been pretty intense and you're looking to solve this and you've really had this focus energy, it's nice to give each other a compliment or a high five, something to kind of break up this time that might have been a little bit more focused and a little different kind of energy. So now I'm asking MJ and Jared to come back to us, and they're going to help us work on a scenario that will implement this kind of situation. So MJ and Jared, tell me what's going on.
Yeah, we wanted to work through a conflict that we're having. So with all of the coronavirus and news going around, I want to hear all the news. I want to know everything that's going on, all the research, all the latest updates. I listen to it all, throughout the day, and then I give that information to my family so that they know what's going on. And then if people ask me questions or concerns, then I have some data that I can provide to them. And it's frustrating to me because that data that I'm giving is not always welcome for the people that I'm giving it to.
And Maryse, I don't want to be overloaded with details and information all day long about all the science that's going on around the coronavirus. Really, all I need to know is the high level summary, what's going on, and I'm fine, and I need to just check out from it.
So it sounds like this is a problem that's been going on for a while and you're wanting some help to resolve the problem.
Yeah, it's frustrating for sure.
Is this a good time for us to do this? You feeling?
Yeah, we both are okay doing this.
Sure.
Great. So we've talked about the 5 agreements before. So it's something that you're just discussing between the two of you,
Mm-hmm.
that each person will take one person will speak at a time. And you're telling me you want to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And when we look for solutions, we're going to look that they're equal, fair, and that they're reasonable, respectful, and related. Great.
Okay.
So we've heard a little bit about the problem, but I'd like for you to have an opportunity to share it again to one another. And who would like to go first?
Okay, you can go.
Well, I'm feeling really stressed out with my work. It's really picked up since everybody has started working from home. So there's far more emails, there's far more conference calls. And so I'm feeling overwhelmed with all of the coronavirus information coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think it's just too much for me. And I need to kind of just set a boundary, I guess, a little bit and say, I only want to know the high level information. So just give me the basic facts and I'll go off and process that. And I think that's all I really need right now.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you have a lot going on, and you have a lot of work and stress, and the information about the coronavirus and the news and other things is coming in all aspects, and that is overwhelming you, and you don't want as much information. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Sounds like you feel heard, Jared.
Thanks.
Okay, let's hear from your perspective, MJ.
So my perspective is I just want to know all the details because I feel like that empowers me, and then I can have answers when people ask me questions, family members wanting to know specifics about the biology of things, and then I want you to be informed so that if people ask you, you have an answer for them, and that we are informed of what's going on because things are changing on such a rapid scale from day to day, from hour to hour. And I just want everybody to know the information, and it's frustrating to me that not everybody seems to have that same desire for the information that I have.
All right. Jared, do you want to paraphrase what you're hearing from MJ?
Yeah, so what I think I'm hearing from you is that it's really important for you to know, all of the latest information that's coming in terms of the science behind it, all the public community announcements that are going on behind it, what's going on with the kids in school, what's going on with the neighborhoods, and a lot of times there's, information coming in from the president, from the governor, from the local authorities, and you want to stay on top of it, and you want to be. If anybody asks you about it, you want to be prepared for that answer.
Yeah, that's correct.
Great job paraphrasing. Now, how about considering what each of you would do differently now, understanding each other's perspective? And like I mentioned, this may lead to solutions, but just briefly giving some sense of what you could do differently.
I think I could tone it down a little bit of the amount of times I talk about it, maybe talk about other things as well, instead of always leading maybe with that first information about what's going on.
Okay. And Jared?
I think I could probably initiate the conversation. At times when I'm feeling like I could handle the information, I could then initiate with you and talk about the coronavirus and kind of get the update from you in a time that works well for me.
Okay.
Sounds great. Now let's brainstorm all sorts of solutions. As long as they're related, reasonable, and respectful, we'll consider them. So what do you think might be some solutions to this situation?
Well, I have a lot of sources that I get my information to, so maybe I could just text him the links to those sources and he could look at them when he feels up to it as well. Maybe I could put a little tagline summary in it that way, and that way it's not overwhelming. He can choose how much data he gets, maybe.
Okay.
Let's see. Maybe if we could find the time to sit down and maybe view the sources or watch the news together. I think that would be a time where we could kind of connect on a common theme and we could kind of both get the updates in real time.
Yeah, that could work.
Does it help knowing each other's situations in terms of being more accepting of each of your needs that you have for what is important to you?
Yeah, I think I didn't quite realize how much I was bombarding him with the information. As things would come up, I would just relay it in real time. And I think looking back, it's happening so many times per day. I think I didn't realize quite how much I was stressing him out and overwhelming him with the information.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I might have been maybe pushing back a little bit hard on, just trying to ignore the details. And maybe there is a little bit more information that I need to be paying attention to because this is a very interesting time in our lives.
So what do you think that you come up with as solutions that you want to go with at this point, knowing that they might not be permanent, but that you'd like to implement for the next few weeks or months?
I kind of like both of our ideas. So maybe I could send the link of a really short, concise source that summarizes things. And then, like you said, maybe we could watch that together at a time where you've had a moment to de-stress from work, and we could make that our check-in time.
I like that idea. I want to spend time together. And so maybe we can find time to spend time together and get the updates at the same time.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you so much for working this out together. And it helps us to see how a real life situation and how we're looking to unravel that using all the various steps. So thank you, Jared and MJ, so much for all the demonstrations you've helped us with in this webinar.
No problem.
Good job working out a problem.
All right.
Yeah, that compliment. Thanks. All right. Thank you. So one of the reasons that sometimes happens that when a problem keeps coming up again and again, it may be that there are some needs there that are unmet. And so if we can get to the root of the problems and really unravel what it is that's going on and meet the needs of one another, and we really got a good sense of that in our little scenario there with Jared and MJ, that they wanted to be sure that their needs were being met. And so if a solution doesn't work forever, well, that's okay. We can have the tools to come back to it and learn more about each other as we do this. So that kind of concludes the recipe part. And so Irene, I wanted to check in with you if we have I think we have some time for some questions that
Yes.
we can go to.
Well, first of all, this is fabulous, and we really, and we really appreciate your sharing your expertise with all of us. I do want to ask if you could say more about related and give some examples of what's not related and what is related.
Sure. So the related portion is sometimes the most difficult. And this can happen. One example that comes to mind is when children at the house have done something, not put away their clothes or something like that, and then other privileges are taken away. And those other privileges have nothing to do with it. They're not related. So we want as much as possible to find something that's related to a problem in finding the solution. So it also, when it's related, it doesn't have that punitive feel to it, and it's much more accepting, and it actually works better when it's related. Does that help enough?
That's great.
Right.
Also, there's a question about what if somebody keeps bringing up the same problem after you feel like you've resolved it, but they just keep bringing it up and referring to it, making comments,
Uh-huh. And sometimes when we're in the middle of a problem, other things come up, right? It just seems to unpack and all of a sudden now it's not only the problem about watching news, but other things can come up, and the other things are things that are unresolved. And so when we're looking to solve a problem, we want to have that agreement to look to solve one problem at a time. And if other problems come in, to be sure that we make an agreement to not try to solve all of them. It can be too overwhelming. And if a problem keeps coming up again and again, it could be that the root of the need that a person has not completely been revealed. And sometimes we don't know even our own needs. So taking time to reflect of what is the need that's not being fulfilled, and how can I express that to the people that are around me with whom I might be having conflicts, can really make a difference.
Well, thank you. I want to thank MJ and Jared for putting on these demos for us. And I do want to say that they're doing a fabulous job of role playing. And we picked the news example for them. I just want to be full disclosure because they are very, very aware that it's important for the emotional safety of their kids and for their own emotional safety to limit access to the news. And so they were showing what happens in a lot of homes that we're hearing about. And I just want to, I think we made it so real that people thought it was actually what they were doing. And I also, the World Health Organization just came out with a recommendation that nobody should be watching the news more than twice a day for our own emotional health and safety. So, but that conflict within people. Another question is, what if one person is really messy and maybe, or maybe not messy, but just relaxed, and another person is really somebody who likes to have order? What might be some of the solutions or the stuck places or the history of a conflict like that?
I can relate to that one.
Okay.
Yeah, so that can happen really easily. I myself, I'm a multitasker, and I like to have projects out and working on different things. And my husband likes to have things organized and all in place. And one of the, as we unraveled again what the root of these things were, I came to realize that he grew up living in a trailer, and everything had to have its place. And you had to, when something was put away in a certain place so you could find it again. However, I grew up with my dad who traveled, and he liked to bring in mementos and kind of like as a gift for his absence. And we had all sorts of mementos around the house. So that seemed like clutter. And so we came to realize that we each had our needs. I had the need for being able to multitask in that. And so we are in these confined quarters, and we've arranged that we have time. Certain places of our home are just, we keep that off of the mail that comes in, the countertop in our kitchen, and it really makes a difference. And then we have a little guest room where I'm in now, and this is where I do my work, and I can leave a mess here and honor that having neatness is important. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of finding out what are the needs of each person in a situation. And if you really want to solve the problem, you're going to want to do it. I don't intentionally leave my stuff out to annoy him. He doesn't ask for things to be neat to annoy me. It's just, this is important to him. And I think if we understand each other that way, that it can make a difference.
That's fabulous. Well, Maryse, was there anything you wanted to say in closing? Because you've just done a fabulous job, and I really, really appreciate your, you're teaching all of us. I'm learning more, and I've been working with you for years, and I learn every single time I work with you.
Well, thank you, Irene, vice versa. I would just like to say that there are lots of resources out there. Maybe some of us are feeling bombarded with some. Choose those select ones. I would definitely have Kidpower on the list, and the webinars that Kidpower has been promoting and putting together. And to know that there are other resources, like I mentioned, the blogs that I've written might be helpful. And reach out to one another. I'm hearing people do that as they get into cleaning out their garages and finding something and then offering it to somebody else because they don't need it themselves. So Irene, I do want to thank you very much for having me as a person.
One more question.
Oh, sure.
Okay, somebody wrote, what if somebody doesn't want to resolve an issue? And I have my answer for that, but I'd like to hear yours.
Oh, I'd actually love to hear yours.
Okay, that's where boundaries come in. If somebody wants to solve a conflict, you can work on it together, and you can find a common ground, a common solution. Sometimes people don't want to, and that's where boundaries come in. We have a whole webinar that is recorded, and we're going to be redoing. We're also going to be doing workshops on boundaries for people, because in close quarters, boundaries and knowing how to persist in the face of negative reactions to boundaries are more important than ever. So that's the answer. But often, if you take the time, and I found this with my husband, and we've been married 46 years. If we finally, after all this time, take the time to really listen and understand, often people get to a calmer place if they feel heard and like you care about what their needs are. Not always. And when you can get to that calm, peaceful place with somebody, amazing things can happen. And sometimes you just need to set boundaries. It's I say it's two sides of a coin. There's boundary setting and there's conflict resolution, and they're both really, really important. So if you want to email me, and the person who wrote this at safety@kidpower.org, we never share personal details about it. We do share our solutions to problems. I can give more specific recommendations about what kind of conflict it is and what some of your options might be. However, again, I want to say, Maryse, thank you. And I want to say to all of you, thank you so much for the nature of these webinars. You can do a great deal of good in your world if you will share some of the ideas and skills from this webinar and from our other webinars and programs with somebody in your life. People can, it is amazing how much difference just one simple skill, just that whole concept of the agreements you need to make before you decide to resolve a conflict, for example. This can make our lives better. And that's what we want to do, whether we're in this pandemic, that we want skills that will go throughout our lives and the lives of the people that we love, and especially our kids. So please share a skill. Please do tell people about our emotional safety webinar, and we will be having more webinars soon, more online workshops, because we are really committed to making our skills accessible to as many people as possible. We want people to feel safe and to be safe. And so you've done the most important thing. And if you're in a position to make even a small donation, it would be a huge help to us. We're doing these workshops without any funding at all, and in a time of a great loss of income, like so many of you. So if you're in a position to help us out, that would be appreciated. But even more, stay in touch. Tell us what kinds of ways we can be of support to you, and we will do our best to answer you. We talk about connection, and about, if we don't hang on tightly, especially now when we're so far apart, we're going to lose connection. But if we can hang on tightly, either just with each other one at a time, or again, if we don't hang on tightly, we're going to lose connection. And we can all stay connected with each other and with our communities, and help make this time, as good as it can be, and learn a lot from it, and stay safe and healthy while we do it. So with that, thank you again, and let's stay in touch.